Well, we've covered the bracketing and flash. We've just got one series of custom menus left to go, and that's our controls. The first one is the switch. That's referring to your on-off switch and this little illuminator. The first one is simply, it's going to light the LCD. So when you're in dim light, your top panel will be lit. If you go to both, when you turn that little illuminator on, not only does it light the top display panel, but it activates the info panel on the back as well and lights it. Exactly. My lovely model here. Okay, our next setting is the multi-selector center button. You can program in the function of the center button on your multi-selector. In shooting mode, you have the option of whether it's just going to default to center focus point, or if it's just going to highlight the focus point that you've selected, or you can totally deactivate it. And then in playback mode, you have the option of either turning the thumbnail setting on or off, viewing your histograms, zooming in, which I find useful. Brad, I think you have yours set that way?
Yeah, just to check critical focus whenever we're shooting. Just want to zoom in real quick, move around to what our subject is, and that way we can see if it's sharp or not.
Precisely. That's just making it a much quicker step than going through the zoom in
otherwise
button
you're
on the side.
zooming. It's just one click instead of 5 or whatever.
Exactly. And you also have one final choice, and that's the choose folder. Where we had talked about previously, you can set different folders in the camera. This will allow you to access which of those folders you want to be viewing. Moving along, we have the multi-selector. Now, the first setting, or the default, is to reset the meter off delay. So if you're in a situation where your meter's about to go off, you just simply activate the multi-selector, hit that button anywhere, and it just keeps the meter on longer, or you can have it do nothing at all. The next one, photo info playback. Now, the default on the camera is when you're in playback mode, you scroll left and right to cycle through the images, and you scroll up and down to cycle through your photo info. If you find you're always hitting the wrong button, you can actually reverse those so that up and down takes you through the images, left and right takes you through the photo info. We've got the assign function button. We talked about that earlier. The function button here on the front can be assigned to a specific menu item. You have two options. It's either or. One, you depress the function button and hold it, and as long as you're holding it, that is active. Or if you just want to kick into that setting, whatever it may be, you depress the function button, turn the main command dial, and then as long as you leave it there, it will stay. Now, some of your options are things like bracketing burst, or changing your metering system, or kicking into live view, quality. There's numerous different options in there, and if you refer to your instruction book, or even just look on the back of the menu, you can choose the one that best suits your needs. I've got mine set for the function plus command dial, so I can actually just dial that in and then not sit there and hold the function button the whole time. You can also do the same thing with the preview button. So you've got the ability to have two different settings in these two buttons. And the preview button works the same way. It has similar settings and then some additional ones that are separate from the function button. You can either depress the preview button and either leave it as default preview, or you can choose a function, or you can also depress the preview and turn the command dial. In both those situations, I've set it to depress the button, turn the command dial, continue shooting, and then to get out of that setting, you simply depress the button again and rotate the command dial once more.
And those buttons are totally just a matter of preference of
absolutely.
Whatever you're shooting. You can scroll through the different options there and see, okay, why you would use this way more than this, and set up those buttons to be that function. So it's just totally a matter of preference.
It's a quick menu access. Yeah. Exactly. Thanks. Our next menu item is assign the AEL/AFL button. So kind of similar to your function and depth of field preview button, you have the option of going in here and assigning this button a specific feature. It can be exposure lock, focus lock, it can be both. It can be a flash value lock where you actually lock in the flash output. Again, you have numerous settings, and with that one you can have it where you hold the button down, or you hold the button, dial the command, and then you can release. It will stay active until you hold the button and dial the command again. So you've got two choices. Keep in mind that it's either or. You don't have two sets of options in each of those buttons. It's just which way works better for your style of shooting. We've got shutter speed and aperture lock. You have the ability, if I know I want to shoot at, say, f8, and I don't want to inadvertently turn that dial and change it, I can pick the aperture I want, kick in aperture lock, and no matter how much I turn the sub-command dial, it won't change. I can do the same thing with the shutter. It's either or again, but you have the ability to say, I need this aperture. So you lock it in and it won't change unless you turn that off again. Have you ever used that one?
Honestly, I've not set up the specific buttons to do certain things.
Okay.
But I'm learning that they could be very useful.
There are, and I actually have the two front ones programmed in. I haven't done the rear one. And then the shutter speed and aperture lock, I'm shooting on the fly a lot, lights changing, so I don't want to be committed to something where I have to go into the menu and change it. But those options are available.
And if you're shooting in a studio, the aperture lock might be, if you're trying to get a certain depth of field, that would be very useful to keep that in so you don't inadvertently go down to f2.8 when you need f22.
That's a great application for that, yes. Okay, we've got customized command dials. Well, we've got these command dials and they go a certain direction. That might not be intuitive to you. So the first one is you can reverse the rotation. So rather than going left to right to change aperture, like if I'm going left to right to increase my aperture, I can reverse that. The next one is to change the main and sub-command dials entirely. So I make the sub-command dial in front my main command dial, and the main command dial becomes the sub-command dial. The next one would be I can change the sub-command dial to older lenses that still had the aperture ring. Mm-hmm. So instead of turning the sub-command dial, I can turn the aperture ring. Okay. And the final one is the menus and playback. I can actually have it set so that, as Brad was mentioning, when you're cycling through the menus, you can actually use the main command dial to cycle through the images or even through the menus. I can either leave that on or disengage it by turning it off. Our next setting, the release button to use dial. Well, as we've talked about, oftentimes you'll hit a button and then turn the command dial to activate it. The default is that you hold the button and turn the command dial, but you can also program it in where you hit the button, turn the command dial, and then hit the button again to disengage that. I find it easier because I'm consciously setting it to select the item, hold the button, and turn the command dial. Okay, the no memory card setting. Basically, the default on this camera is that whether there's a card in it or not, the camera will fire. Well, if you're afraid that maybe you're going to start shooting and not have images to show for it, you could actually turn it so that the camera will lock and not fire unless there is a memory card inserted. I've got that set so that that's exactly how it works on mine. How about you?
I definitely have it set to where it will not fire unless there's a memory card in the camera because of past experience, and that's all I'm going to say.
The voice of experience is a great learning tool. Now, we have reverse indicators. We talked about how you can change the command dials around. Well, you can also change the way the exposure compensation dial works. So basically, when you're in exposure compensation, to go dark, you turn to the right, and to go lighter, or plus compensation, you turn to the left. If that's not intuitive to you, you can actually reverse that so it goes the opposite direction. Being a Nikon shooter for so many years, I've left it at the default. Well, that finishes our custom setting menus. Next, we've got the setup menu.